Philip Rivers, the longtime quarterback of the Los Angeles Chargers, formerly the San Diego Chargers, and this past year with the Indianapolis Colts, has retired. And I don't think that was something that we didn't see coming as fans and people in the media. I think we're all sort of projecting that he would retire at the end of the year, but it still is a little bit sad. I am a massive NC State fan, and I think that's where my personal affinity for Philip Rivers comes in. NC State is not necessarily a football powerhouse, and Philip Rivers led NC State in 2002 to the only 11 win season we ever had. So, if you can see right here, you can tell, State fan. I love Philip Rivers. I love Russell Wilson. Those are my guys. But Philip is now done. He's hanging it up. He said that he can now take time to start a family with his wife, which I thought was incredible. But last year, he accepted a job at St. Michael Catholic School in Alabama to coach them when he retired, and now that will be this coming season down there. Philip Rivers has had a Hall of Fame career. Um, I think people have argued whether or not he would be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And that's been something that's been a divisive argument on either side because there's not the definitive, oh, yeah, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think we would say with Ben Roethlisberger, who came in the same year with Philip, yeah, for sure. Ben is going to be a Hall of Famer. But Ben has two rings. And Eli Manning, who came in that same class, also had two rings. In fact, Eli Manning was traded for Philip Rivers on draft night. Philip Rivers was drafted by the New York Giants and traded to the Chargers on draft night. So they were traded for each other. And Eli Manning finished his career with two rings. Now, Philip has more passing yards, more passing touchdowns than both Big Ben and Eli Manning, but if we were to like look at that on a piece of paper, we'd say, oh, well, that doesn't make any sense because Big Ben is better. I would say Philip is better than Eli, but if you were to rank them in a tier of three, you would probably not put Philip Rivers above Ben Roethlisberger. But Philip is a first ballot Hall of Famer in my mind. He's fifth all time in passing yards. He finished his career with 63,000 passing yards and 421 touchdowns. Both of those are good for fifth all time. Now, there is another element to this argument that Philip is a Hall of Famer. We're in an era now of passing the football like none that has ever existed in the history of the NFL before. Um, a lot of the top guys in terms of passing yardage are players that have played in my lifetime. I was born in 1998, so this is recent. Shannon Sharp had his best year of football and then retired like 3 years later in 1998. So I am recent. And Peyton Manning, who at one point held the most passing yards, it's ultimately it's going to be Tom Brady, it's going to be Drew Brees, it's going to be they're going to be number one and number two. Peyton Manning is going to be in there, and Philip Rivers is in there, and those guys all played recently, and so you have to wonder how valuable are those numbers that Philip Rivers put up. So if we're to look at players playing right now that you would think are better than Philip that will probably break his records, you got to think of players like Patrick Mahomes. I think we would all agree that he's probably, barring some kind of injury or freak incident, going to surpass 63,000 yards passing in his career. You got to think that he's going to approach Drew Brees, Tom Brady level, where he's going to be around that 80,000 yard range just because he's been so good so quick. You got to think that if Russell Wilson continues on his upward trajectory, he's been passing much more frequently in recent years. You got to think that he's probably also going to be in that same conversation as well for that 70-ish thousand yard passing in his career, assuming he plays to what he said in the past that he wants to play. He wants to play until he's 45 years old. If he can stay healthy, if he can do that, if he can follow the Tom Brady blueprint, you got to think that he probably also is going to get in that 75,000 range. And then another quarterback would be Deshaun Watson. as well. He right now at 25 has almost 15,000 passing yards, but you got to think, as efficient as he is, and he's just now getting into his prime. In this past season, he passed for 4,800 yards. You got to think if he's just passing 4,300 yards every season when he is 40 years old in 15 more seasons, he's going to be around that 70 to 75,000 passing yard range. So I don't know how valuable Philip Rivers' numbers are. I think that he has benefited from being in an era of players who have passed the ball a ton, but I don't know that we can knock that from him because, at the time today, at the time of his retiring, January 20th, 2021, he is fifth all time in both passing yards and passing touchdowns. That's got to mean something. If you're fifth overall in the history of the NFL in two major categories for your position, that's got to count for something. That's got to say, okay, you're going to be on that Hall of Fame first ballot. So you have to think, okay, he never won a Super Bowl. He doesn't have those rings, but he's got numbers. And the age-old argument with Aaron Rodgers versus Tom Brady has been, well, Rodgers doesn't have the rings, but he's got the numbers. And even then, it's a stretch because Tom Brady is going to have the career passing yards and career passing touchdowns marks. But, I think if you look at the eye test, you say, well, Aaron Rodgers is more talented. So all of that to say, Philip Rivers deserves to be on first ballot Hall of Fame. And, you can say, oh, no, Josh, that's ridiculous. There's quarterbacks that are so much better than him. He was never the best in his era. Look at the numbers. He's fifth all time in both passing yards, passing touchdowns. I think that's got to count for something. But I think maybe there's some bias in there. I'm willing to admit that maybe there's a little bit of bias. I have an affinity for Philip Rivers as a football player. He played at NC State that, I don't really have a team necessarily in the NFL. I like the Seahawks. I like Russell Wilson, but I don't know if I've got a team in the NFL, but I was raised on NC State Wolfpack football. And that's kind of been a miserable existence for me in my lifetime. I've seen multiple 3-9 seasons, and that's tough. Like, it is very difficult to be a fan of a football team when they are 3-9 and getting drubbed by Clemson and North Carolina every year. Like, that's no fun. Those are teams that you got to beat, and it's brutal. It's so awful watching that. But Philip Rivers in 2002, 4 years after I was born, led NC State to an 11-win season, the only 11-win season our football program has ever had. So, if you're thinking about the cap, the best that your program can do on a consistent basis, for NC State, it's about 9 wins. And he got us to 11. And that year, we beat Notre Dame in the Gator Bowl in 2002. And I was there as a 4-year-old little tyke, wearing my little Philip Rivers jersey, stoked out of my mind, as much as a 4-year-old can be, so excited that, we had beaten Notre Dame. NC State doesn't beat Notre Dame. NC State doesn't beat Clemson. Those kind of traditional powerhouses, we just don't beat them. So Philip Rivers, and that year we had Torrey Holt and Jericho Cotchery. That year we beat Notre Dame. We also beat Florida State when they were number 1 in the country that year. That kind of thing does not happen at NC State. And Philip Rivers elevated that football program to a level that it hadn't been before. It was a 7-win max football program before Philip Rivers got there. And he was an unheralded, I think he was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school. He was not anything special. And then he threw for 14,000 yards in college, started all 4 years. Goes to the NFL, first ballot Hall of Famer.